Hey guys, it's Timothy again. I'm going to be looking at the blue and red cards from the full spoiler. I'm not going over every single blue and red card. Actually, blue and black, I believe. Blue and black. But I'm not going over every single card. I'm only going over the cards that were spoiled, specifically on Friday. I've made other videos for all the other days, so if you're interested in those, go check them out. If not, then just chill here with me for a little while. Again, warning, as you probably saw when you clicked the video, that this is going to be a longer video since I'm going over pretty much the bulk of the commons and uncommons for these two colors. I've already done a video for the colorless and white cards, so go check that out. And then I'll have a third part to this for the red and green cards. Keep in mind, I've already done some of the transform cards, so I've already seen a good number of the green cards, but I will be specifically looking at what's been spoiled on Mythic Spoiler in the order it's been spoiled. So if there are some things out of place, then so be it. Anyway, this is intended just to kind of get a sneak peek and give my initial thoughts on the cards from this set. So feel free to disagree in the comments. Feel free to tell me what you're thinking about certain cards, and if you think I'm overvaluating or seriously underrating a card, let me know. To start that off, I think I'm rating this card just fine as pretty bad. Contingency Plan is 1 in a blue. It's essentially the same. It is the same card as Taigum's Scheming, but that didn't really fit the flavor, I guess, because Taigum apparently isn't on Innistrad. Anyway, you look at the top 5 cards. You can choose to put any number of them in your graveyard, and you put the rest back in any order. So at its worst, this is a Scry 5, which isn't terrible. This gets better if you need to be casting instants or sorceries, and it gets better if you are like really trying to push Delirium, but blue's not really a color that needs to do that too much, so I don't really know. A lot of times I would play this. I actually like Taigum's Scheming in cons because of Delve. It could get you a really good Delve creature super early, but I don't think this is worth a slot in most decks. This doesn't develop the board at all. It doesn't affect the game at all. It's just improving your draws, essentially. And while it's okay on turn 2, it's not anything impressive. I would rather just be putting creatures on the board instead of giving myself card disadvantage for something like this. It is card disadvantage. It doesn't replace itself. Moving on, we have, I believe Convolute is a reprint from Original Ravnica, maybe? One of those sets. Anyway, it's 2 in a blue for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 4 mana. Spell Shrivel was decent in Oath of the Gatewatch, and that was a comparable set where there were expensive cards that your opponent want to be casting. So if you think that you need to be really playing a control game and card like Defy Existence isn't cutting it for you, this will get the job done most of the time. It is awkward when you cast this and your opponent actually has 4 mana, but think about Oath of the Gatewatch and Battle for Zendikar. Spell Shrivel, sometimes it wasn't good because your opponent had Eldrazi Scion floating around, so they had extra mana just, sitting there, but your opponent won't have that in this set, so a lot of times this will just be a cancel. And sometimes, like 10% of the time you have this and you hold it up, your opponent will be able to play around it, but I don't know. It's a decent counterspell, so if you're in the market for counterspells, this is fine. It's a little bit, I think the less restrictive mana cost makes it a little bit better than something like Broken Concentration, but overall it's not super exciting. It's just, it fills a role. If you want to counter things, play it. Displace is a 3 mana instant, 2 in a red. It says exile up to 2 target creatures you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So this is an instant blink on up to 2 of your creatures. It really, you want to be using this if you have a lot of Enter the Battlefield triggers. Notice that this doesn't work on a lot of the Eldrazi because those are on casting. What this does do nicely is it fizzles removal spells, or if your opponent, we'll see when we get to red and black that there are a couple spells that can kill off multiple things at the same time. This can save your creatures. So Essence Flux is a card from Shadows that I really liked as a way to fizzle a removal spell, but it was 1 blue. A lot of times you'll use this to fizzle a removal spell, but it's 3 mana instead of 1, and it gets a little bit worse. Plus, it doesn't have any extra bonuses. So play this if you have really strong ETB effects. Play this if your opponent is super heavy on the removal. Otherwise, leave it out of your deck and don't play it at all. It's the type of card that's, you know, it depends on the deck quite a bit. Sometimes it's just nearly unplayable, and sometimes it's actually really good. Drag Under is our next card. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Return target creature to its owner's hand, draw a card. So kind of an overcosted unsummon that cantrips itself into another card. I like this effect. It is a sorcery. I just read it the first time and assumed it was an instant, but that would be a really, really good instant. I would play that in a heartbeat. Sorcery makes me kind of reluctant to play too many of them, but I think I would most of the time still play one of them. Keep in mind that these sort of effects have the kind of niche situation where you can bounce one of your own creatures to get some sort of value off of it, or to like get off a problematic aura, something along those lines. But a lot of times you'll just use this as an unsummon. Effects like this are very similar to tap abilities or freeze abilities like Cripple and Chill type effects. If you are playing like a white-blue version or a red-blue version, a very tempo-based aggro strategy where you want to be, you know, attacking a lot and keeping your opponent's creatures off your back, then this card gets a lot better. If you're just using it for your turn to, you know, bounce something and then you say go, it gets a lot worse. But I like unsummon effects, but I like them a lot when they're instant speed, so it loses points there. But the draw card is really nice. I think it's the type of card that will be very good in spell-based decks, too. There are a lot of decks that care about instants or sorceries, and that's where it will really shine. Enlightened Maniac is a 3 and a blue human. It's a 0/2, which sucks, by the way. When it enters the battlefield, put a 3/2 Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield. So this is essentially a really bad chump blocker that comes with a 3/2. So I'm evaluating this very similar to just a 4-mana 3/2, since this 0/2 body is not going to be super relevant unless you are trying to sacrifice permanents or something like that. This is a common, and it's an okay card. I don't really see a lot of ways in blue to take advantage of this ability. Keep in mind we did just see a card that can blink things, so this is a good target for blinking. If you ever blink it once, it's gotten, you know, 6/4 power, 6/4 stats on the battlefield. I could see a deck where you take the blink effect and then you take maybe a bunch of these and you just try to swarm the field with 3/2s. That actually seems pretty good, but in most situations I'm not seeing the effectiveness of this card. It's like a solid below curve card that you'll play in some of your blue decks, but not a card you're super happy about most of the time, or at least I wouldn't be very excited to have it in my deck. Exultant Cultist is another human in blue that are just humans all over blue. But when it dies, you draw a card, and it's a 2/2 for 3. This is a solid card. This is the type of card that really punishes your opponent for playing 3/2s, where you just like, okay, I will trade for your higher power creature, and I get to replace it. It's also the type of card that gets better if you have sacrifice effects. So in black and white especially, there are a lot of effects that require you to sacrifice permanents. This is the guy you want to sacrifice. It reminds me of Palace Familiar, I believe is the name. In fact, I'm willing to bet it's down here. Nope. Youthful Scholar is, though. You know, those cards from Dragons of Tarkir and Fate Reforged that rewarded you for them dying. Of course, Exploit was there, but, you know, same kind of deal. If you can ever sacrifice this, you get value off of it. And if you can ever trade with a creature, that's best case scenario. At its worst, it's a 3-mana 2/2, which is kind of shoddy compared to all of the, you know, 2/3s floating around this set, but you'll play it. I'll definitely play a couple copies in most of my blue decks. Fogwalker is a 1 and a blue 1/3 spirit. It has Skulk, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This is the type of card that you need to actually make sure you read when you go to pre-release, because it doesn't tap a creature and keep it tap down. It just stops it from untapping. So if your opponent's already attacked with something, or you have a tap effect that's locked it down, this stops it from untapping, but it does not actually tap it itself. which leads me to believe this card's a lot worse than it could be. If this came in and tapped something, this would be like a slam dunk solid 2-drop creature. Otherwise, it's just a 1-power Skulk creature, and 1/3s aren't like incredible. Skulk on a 1-power creature that doesn't benefit you for hitting the opponent isn't impressive. 1-power creatures are like, okay, I'll take one, and this is a minor annoyance, but eventually you'll find a way to deal with this. So I'm not impressed with this card. Again, blink effects make it a little bit more appealing, but the blink effects aren't really great on their own. So in combination, you're turning 2 mediocre cards into like an okay effect. Probably not something you want to do very often. Geist of the Archives is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 0/4 Defender Spirit at uncommon. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. I can actually see this being a card that people will fight over in draft. I would love to have this in any blue deck I play. Think about Scryfish, whatever that card's name is. Its name is Scryfish. It should be Scryfish. Sign the petition below to change Sigil Starfish to Scryfish. Anyway, that card was upgraded to an uncommon for a reason. It was in Born of the Gods, I think, and then maybe Journey in the Nyx as a common. And if you don't know the card I'm talking about, it's a 0/3 and it has a tap ability. You scry 1. This is a little more limited because you can only scry on your upkeep, but that's still a really great effect, especially on a creature that's really hard to kill. So this creature is not super relevant in combat. It's never going to deal damage, but it is going to block for days, and it's going to just... Over time, you will see the effect of scrying. You know, you put a land on the bottom, you draw a decent card. Or if you're looking for a land, you put, you know, an expensive card on the bottom and you hit a land. You will notice these additional scry abilities that don't require you to use mana over and over again are very good. And like I said, Scryfish was upgraded to an uncommon in Origins for that reason. It's a very good card. That was just a 0/3 for 2. This is a little bit bigger for 3. But I can see this being a card that you will actively want in your deck. I don't care that it's a spirit. You know, that's not really super relevant. But people will be fighting to have 1 or 2 of these in their decks. Trust me. Lest we remember the Starfish Massacre of 2015. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, Laboratory Brute. This is a 4 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you mill yourself 4. It is a zombie horror. Not a zombie to really be excited about, and obviously you only really want to play this card if you are either dedicated to zombies or if you are dedicated to milling yourself. I'm again not seeing why blue has all these crazy mill effects when there aren't too many ways to take advantage of it. So cards like this are supplementary to like black decks or delirium based green or white decks or something like that. On its face, this is just a hill giant that mills you 4, which is like an okay card, but not something you're actively seeking to have in a lot of decks. I would skip it most of the time, to be honest. Nebelgeist. Nebelgeist? I don't know. Am I saying that right? Is that a word? Nebelgeist Herald, the Herald of Nebelgeists, is a flash 2/1 for 3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, I misread this the first time. When when this guy or another spirit enters the battlefield under your control, tap target creature an opponent controls. So I missed that part about other spirits the first time I read this card. This is why I look over sets. It's awesome. This card seems really good. This is a payoff for playing a lot of spirits. And keep in mind, a lot of spirits have flash. This guy also stacks in multiples, so you can pick up one of them, you flash it in, tap it down, swing for 2 next turn, flash in another one, tap 2 creatures down, swing for 4, and you can just get advantage doing that, keeping your opponent's best creatures down. Obviously, every time I see one of these good spirits, I think Rattlechains. Rattlechains is kind of the card that really holds spirits together. By letting you flash in creatures and get their bonuses at instant speed instead of on your turn. This is even good, like I mentioned with the card earlier, the Unsummon effect. This is really good in aggressive decks where you want to be attacking a lot because you can play it, keep your opponent's best creature down, and swing through them. This is a very strong card. I really, really like it. And even if it didn't have that second clause at all, I would definitely play a 3 mana 2/1 Flash Flyer. That's just a decent card on its own. So I'm actually excited, and I'm glad I'm rereading the card because that seems really good. you know, despite me not being able to pronounce his name. Sorry, Nibbles, I love you. What do we have here? Scour the laboratory. Scour it. So 4 and double blue, 6 mana for an instant that draws you 3 cards. It costs 2 less to cast if you have Delirium active. So this is a decent payoff in blue for having Delirium. On its surface, it goes from being a pretty mediocre card to being an excellent card. That's you know, the difference of 2 mana. That's how much of a difference it makes. 3 cards for 6 mana is something that you will sometimes play but not be excited about. 3 cards for 4 mana at instant speed is great. That is wonderful. So if you have Delirium going, then this gets a lot better. If I have one of these in my pool, I would actually be looking to pick up that scab creature we saw just a couple seconds ago, the hill giant that mills you 4. That makes this card a lot better. So if you can cast this on turn 4, you reload your hand, it becomes an instant speed naturalize. That is a fantastic card, but you really do need to be able to get Delirium going. I could see wanting to play something like Pour Over the Pages instead if I really knew it would be a struggle to get Delirium going, but if I can get Delirium, then I'm very happy with it. Spontaneous Mutation. Almost said Combustion. 1 blue for a Flash Aura. The enchanted creature gets -X/-0, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. This is a good card. I don't really know what else to say about it other than this is a good card. You do need to get cards in your graveyard, but is that really that hard in blue? You're going to be casting instants or sorceries, you know, you're going to be casting a lot of spells, you're probably going to be cantripping a lot, and you'll be trading off creatures early on. This is a good card, and the fact that it's just a 1 blue flash isn't a lot of commitment, so think about like Sleep Paralysis. That's 4 mana to lock a creature down. This is 1 mana to kind of lock a creature down. They can still block with it. It gives them a good sack target. All the same problems with auras that affect your opponent's creatures. But this is good enough that I would play a couple of these if I was consistently either milling myself or had a really heavy spell-based deck. I like this card a lot. I think it's solid for 1 blue. This is the type of card that if it cost 2 or 3 mana, I'd be a lot less excited about. But at 1 blue, that's actually really good effect. Last blue card on the list here, Tattered Haunter. This evolves from Tattered Ghastly and evolves into Tattered Gengar. This video brought to you by Taco Bell. Anyway, Tattered Haunter is 1 in a blue for a 2/1 flyer that can block only creatures with fire. So Vaporkin or Welkin turn, if you will. I don't know what it is with these sets lately and these 2/1 flyers for 1. They're just solid creatures. They're at common, uncommon, rare. They're like all over the place. We already have 2/1 flyers for 2 in this set too. Olivia's Bloodsworn comes to mind, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 others I'm forgetting. But these are solid creatures. I mentioned this in a video a while back, so if you've heard it before, I'm sorry. But when I first started playing, I really underestimated cards like this. I thought cards like this were actively bad, and I avoided them, and then I played against them and got my butt handed to me by a 2/1 flyer that came down on turn 2 and ended up doing 10 to 12 damage throughout the course of the game. Your opponent, some people will build decks that just cannot deal with flyers. This will get them. This will deal so much damage over the course of the game. Is it exciting? No. But you'll pick it up in your blue decks. This is also the type of card I would recommend boarding out for game 2s where your opponent is on the play and they are attacking with a bunch of things. That not being able to block thing will get you sometimes. You could have had a different creature in that slot that can block. But don't underestimate a 2/1. A 2 damage flyer for 2. That drawback is often less of a drawback than the upside is an actual upside. Anyway, moving into black. I'll cover the black cards and then I'll go ahead and stop this video. Boon of Emrakul. I almost said Erebos. Boon of Emrakul is 2 in a black for an enchantment. The enchanted creature gets +3/-3. So I read this as a sorcery speed removal spell. That's not exactly what it is. Sometimes, a very, very small percentage of the times, you will use this as an actual pump on one of your creatures. But that is just a small percentage of the time. It reminds me of Spatial Contortion or Nameless Inversion or a number of other effects. I'm actually curious what's in the thesaurus here. Actually, none of those, but It reminds me of those instant speed spells that give +3, -3. You use those as removal most of the time, and I imagine you'll use this as removal. -3 is a pretty big chunk, so that will deal with a good number of things. Where this is bad is when your opponent has like 4 toughness creatures with trample or something like that. But that's a very like minuscule situation that comes up every now and then. This is just a decent card. I wouldn't overload my deck with them because it is essentially akin to a sorcery speed removal spell, but I'd be happy having 1 or 2 of them. If I was really fighting somebody else at the table for black cards, you know, somebody got all the luck and they picked up all the murders and stuff, it's very likely that cards like this will still be in the pack, and you can actually scrap together a good deck by using these instead of your quote-unquote better removal in the set. Moving on. Dusk Feaster. He feasts on dusk. He eats dusk. Which is gross, by the way. If you've ever had dusk, I would prefer dawn. Dawn is much better. Leaves kind of a soapy taste in your mouth. Anyway, Dusk Feaster is... sorry. Dusk Feaster is 5 and double black for a 4/5. The art is awesome on this card, by the way. I'm just checking out the art now. It's an awesome vampire. But yeah, it is a vampire. It's an uncommon. It's a 4/5 for 7. Delirium says it costs 2 less to cast if you have those 4 card types, and it is a flyer. So this, just like that 6-mana blue spell, Scour the Laboratory, this is a card that goes from being for 7 mana to being really, really good for 5 mana if you get Delirium going, and it's in a color that I think is better suited to take advantage of Delirium. Black just has better ways to mill yourself and better upside to doing that in the first place than just a draw spell. This is a good card. It reminds me of Calastria Nightwatch from Battle for Zendikar, I believe. It was a 4/5 4/5 vanilla creature for 5 that said if you gain life that turn it gains flying. This is very similar in that it's a 4/5 sometimes for 5 that, you know, you have to do a little bit of work to make it a good creature, but that's a sizable body on a flyer. That's a very solid flyer, and if you have to pay the 7 mana for this, you could be doing worse as well. Hopefully you have Delirium by the time you're getting to, you know, turn 5 or 6 anyway, and then this is just a really solid pain in the butt. Sorry, I try not to cuss on the channel. Pain in the butt for the opponent. 4/5 is very strong, and 5 toughness is a sweet spot here. A lot of things like Throttle only deal 4 damage or -4. So solid card for Delirium based decks, and like an okay card for non-Delirium based black decks. Gavany Unhallowed is 4 mana 2/4 zombie at common. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on Gavany Unhallowed. So really encourages you to play a heavy creature deck. I am not in love with Unruly Mob in Shadows over Innistrad. It just got outclassed very quickly, and oftentimes it won't grow enough in the course of the game, but sometimes people leave it alone and they underestimate it, and it does get out of hand. This has a decent initial body that I would think it's actually a decent card. Think about it. If you can even get one of your creatures to die before this dies, that becomes a 3/5 for 4, which is good. A 2/4 for 4 is a little bit worse, but a 3/5 for 4 is solid. And then if you ever get to the point where, you know, 2 of your creatures died, then this really gets up there. It's a 4/6 all of a sudden. So this is another card I would not underestimate. Similar to Pyrehound, gets out of hand very quickly if you let the deck do what it's supposed to be doing. And black is a color that can kill its own creatures to give this thing an advantage. So very strong common, I think. Not best common in the set by a long shot, I don't think. Or best black common in the set, but something that you should not underestimate. I'll be trying this card out. I think it's actually got a lot of potential here. Graph Harvest. This is a cool card. It is 1 black for an enchantment. Zombies you control have menace, and for 3 and a black, you can exile a creature from your graveyard to get a 2/2 zombie. Now, obviously, this is the type of card you really only want to play if you're dedicated zombies. That second effect is expensive enough that you will leave it out of a good number of your black decks, even though it does give you decent value from the graveyard. so you will include it in a good number of black decks, even without a lot of zombies. Plus, it's, kind of like a hand-in-hand type card, where it's actually feeling its own, creatures that it makes. It gives a menace. So 2/2 menaces from the creatures in your graveyard is pretty solid. If you, however, are in a deck that's dedicated to zombies and you have a lot of other zombies, this is just a very, very solid pickup. This reminds me of Halpack Resurgence or Stensia Masquerade, the type of cards where once you're in a certain archetype, once you've dedicated yourself to werewolves or dedicated yourself to vampires or so on and so forth, this is a card you're actively looking to pick up. The problem here is that a good number of black decks will still play this, so I wouldn't expect it to wheel all the time. Halpack Resurgence is a card that nobody wants unless they're in green werewolves specifically. This is a card that a good number of black-blue based decks or just black decks in general will still pick up. I think this is a strong card. It's not quite on the level of like Stensia Masquerade or Halpack Resurgence as a tribal card goes, but it's a solid pickup on its own, and it doesn't have a lot of initial cost to get down. Also, if you just have a bunch of zombies on board and you drop it, you can just win on the spot sometimes. Given all your stuff, Menace is good, in case you've never played with a card like that. Liliana's Elite. This is the pinnacle of Liliana's creatures, apparently. 3 mana, 1/1. Good job, Liliana. 3 mana, 1/1. Uncommon zombie. Gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Way better in a self-mill deck than it is in most other decks. Not even really good in just like a dedicated zombie deck. This is the type of card that you need to kind of have the deck for it. Don't just jam it in any black deck. Think about Revenant from Origins. That was an uncommon, and I don't think I played against it a single time, or the times I included it in my deck when I had the deck for Revenant, it just didn't pan out. So sometimes this card will, grow to like a 3/3 or a 4/4. If you have 2 creatures in your graveyard, this is a solid 3-drop. It's a 3/3 for 3, and if you ever get past that point, it grows and grows and grows. But there are just miserable times where this is the first thing you play on turn 3, and it's a 1/1. Not great. There is the good news for this is there's a lot of support for an archetype like this in the format. And instant speed ways, there are tons of instant speed ways to pitch a creature from your hand to grow this at instant speed. Think about the Dragoon, Olivia's Dragoon, or the Noose Constrictor. Just tons of ways to pitch creatures and kind of get your opponent if they try to block this. So do not just put this in any black deck. Make sure you have a deck that can take advantage of it. But once you're at that point, this is actually a really strong card. So I'm sorry, Liliana. Your Elite is pretty good. Just, I don't know. I just don't see those things fighting Emrakul, really, right? Right? Give me some love here. Moving on. Markov Crusader. 5 mana, 4/3, Vampire Knight with lifelink. And if you control another vampire, has haste. This is a solid card. 3 toughness is not what I want on a 5 mana card. But the fact that you can sneak this in if you are if your opponent's tapped out or they just don't have a creature that can block this favorably, you can sneak this in and really, present a good life swing while having this solid creature up. And also, again, really awesome art on this card. But this is the type of card that in certain matchups it's pretty bad. If your opponent's just playing super defense with these dumb creatures that can block 3 toughness creatures, it gets a lot worse. It dies to more removal than a lot of other creatures would. But this is very good for vampires. Vampires actually don't have a ton of ways to be gaining life outside of other lifelink creatures, and this can really get in there. It's a little bit worse if you're just playing it for 5 and it doesn't have haste, so it gets a lot better with other vampires in your deck. But I would still play this a good number of times in my black decks. Think of that white common we mentioned in the last video. It was a 5 mana 3/4 with lifelink for 5. Same deal here. You'll cut it if you have better 5-drops, and if you're in a deck that can take advantage of it, it gets better, obviously. So not like the best. It's definitely not as good as like Murder or something like that, but it's a solid creature for a deck that could actually use the lifelink ability. Prying Questions is a 3 mana sorcery at uncommon. It says target opponent loses 3 life and puts a card from his or her hand on top of his or her library. So I like effects like that. I like effects that really just set your opponent back a turn. Usually I like when you can take a permanent and put it back on top of their library, but taking a card from their hand and putting it back is very, very similar. It essentially means that they're not seeing anything new. This is the type of card that gets way, way better when you're ahead in a match and really isn't that great. In fact, it's pretty bad when you're behind in a match or when you really need to top deck something. So if this was just... The thing that I like here is that it's a good mix of things for 3 mana that I think it justifies a card. Uncommon, I don't really know that it's that powerful. Also, if your opponent doesn't have any cards in their hand, this is way, way freaking worse. But I don't know. Like, if your opponent just cast an instant in response, and that was the last card in their hand, they essentially made this card really sucky. If this gained you life too, I'd be even, higher up on it. But I'm saying this card's not as good as it looks, but it's still a solid card. Again, it's better when you're ahead in the game and you're really punishing your opponent for drawing a card that they just had anyway, as those effects usually are. But solid card, just not very exciting for me and doesn't really fit my playstyle. Rise from the Graves. This has been reprinted, I believe, a couple of times, but new art on it and awesome art too. If you've never seen the card before, it's 4 and a black for a sorcery. You take a creature from a graveyard and put it onto the battlefield, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. Cool thing is you can take your opponent's creature too, so if you're playing kind of mill or if your opponent's playing self-mill, this card gets a lot better. This is the type of card that it has a really high upside. Reanimation effects are usually pretty good, but that's all it does is take a creature. So if you're like curving out at 4, or you just have a really early game black deck or something like that, this card is a lot worse because you need to really justify paying 5 mana for it, like getting something that's probably a 5-drop or higher. But oftentimes you will have a card like that in your deck, and if you don't, your opponent most certainly will. So this is a type of card that sometimes it's bad, and when it's good, it's actually really good. So I'm glad it's reprinted. It's an uncommon. I don't know what the rarity was before, but it feels like an uncommon, I guess. Anyway, Ruthless Disposal. Really awesome art on this card. No idea what the heck's going on. Just looks like a bunch of rats, but this is 4 and a black for a sorcery that you also have to discard a card and sacrifice a creature for. So you're losing a lot of stuff there. Sack a creature and discard a card is a lot of stuff to do for a 5-mana sorcery. But what it does is target creature, 2 target creatures, get -13/-13 till end of turn. Notice that doesn't say up to 2, so there has to be 2 creatures on board. Great 2-headed giant card, wonderful 2-headed giant card, and like a solid card for 1 versus 1. I think, again, this is a great looking card, but it's probably a little bit worse than it looks. This is the type of card that you really need to play a format to see how good it is. I wouldn't be surprised if this was just a fantastic first pickable uncommon from the set, but my initial reaction is that you're paying a lot to do this. You're down a creature, down a card from your hand, and you have to target 2 creatures and pay 5 mana for a sorcery. That's a lot of kind of like strikes against it, but the upside is that you're probably just killing 2 creatures. Which is usually worth those. Again, if you're ahead on this and you can just, kill your opponent's 2 best things, it's pretty incredible. But there are times that you won't even be able to cast this because you can't sack a creature or you can only target 1 creature. So be careful of that. Don't go like all in on them. Don't play 100 of them. Just be careful of it, I'd say. Skurstag Supplicant. Black human. They could have easily made this a vampire, right? But it's a 3 mana 2/3. Human cleric in black. This might be the only black human, maybe, I don't know. But for black mana, you can tap it, discard a card, and each player loses 2 life. Each player, not each opponent. So if you're using this in 2-headed giant, everybody, both teams are losing 4 life. Anyway, I'm not excited about this card. It's a 3 mana 2/3, so this is a type of card that if you need Madness, if you need Delirium, and you're just not finding the ideal cards for it, this will do the job nicely. You don't have to use that ability. You can just play this as essentially a vanilla creature, and then if the ability becomes relevant, take advantage of it. For instance, if you and your opponent are racing, but you're just a little bit ahead, this can really push your opponent, closer to dying. Also worth noting, this is probably one of the only ways in this format to actually end the game in a draw. If both people are 2 or less life and you activate this, that will be a draw. Is that super relevant? I don't know, but it's not often that you get effects like that where you can end the game in a draw without going to time. So keep that in mind. Maybe that's relevant. Never. But, if you can ever end the game in a draw, I don't know why you would. But if you're certainly going to lose, then ending the game in a draw is not the worst thing you can do. A little bit of lag here on my computer, sorry. Strange Augmentation is our next card. It's 1 black for an enchantment that gives the enchanted creature +1/+1. Once you achieve Delirium, you get an additional +2/+2, so it upgrades to a +3/+3 total. 1 mana for +3/+3 is good, but be careful of thinking best case scenario. This card sucks if you cannot get Delirium going, and it's like okay, it's actually pretty strong if you get Delirium going. Dedicated Delirium decks only is what I would play this in, because the downside is that you paid a whole you used a whole card from your hand to give such a minuscule bonus, whereas if you hold it till later in the game and your creature doesn't die, this can actually give a really sizable boost. I'm not excited about this card. I don't love auras in general, and this is not one of the ones that I think is such a huge blowout that you just have to play it. There are some good auras in this block, but I don't think this is really one of them. Maybe I'm underestimating it. +3/+3 for 1 mana that sticks around is actually pretty decent, but you need to get there first. The +1/+1 just isn't cutting it. So again, we're kind of lagging here. We got about 4 cards left, so this may or may not come up. There it goes. Succumb to Temptation is 1 and double black for an instant that says you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. So it's an instant speed Night's Whisper, but it's an additional black mana. It can only target you, so you can't use it like Sign in Blood. It actually doesn't target you at all, but you can't use it on an opponent to have them lose 2 life like you could with Sign in Blood. But this is actually a solid card. I would happily lose 2 life to draw 2 cards. A card is definitely worth 1 of your life, but this is also a card that gets a little bit worse if you're kind of behind in a game and you're already taking a lot of damage. Think like Read the Bones, Painful Truth. Draw spells in black tend to punish you for being behind in a game, but the fact that this is instant is really nice. You can hold it up with other spells. If you're playing like black-blue, you can hold up a counter spell, and if you don't need to use it, you can cast this instead and just, refill your hand with some goodies. Thraben Foulbloods. This is a cool little callback to original Innistrad, where the 3/5 white creature, Thraben Purebloods or something like that. Nice little callback. I can dig it. This is 2 and a black for a 3/2 zombie hound. Because Hound Tribal is a thing too. With Delirium, it gets +1/+1 and has Menace. So once you get that 4th card type, this actually becomes a decent 3-drop creature. Until then, it's just a solid card on its own. So I can see this being played in a lot of my black decks. If I really want to fill up that 3-drop slot, this will be a card I'm looking for. It's a common. It's a creature that is usually good at its point in the curve, and it gets better once you achieve probably what you want to be doing in the deck. So this reminds me of like a Stallion of Ashmouth, where it's like not really what you want to be doing with your Delirium-based deck, but the type of card that you'll put in there anyway, and it'll be better. Alright, 2 more cards to go, and I have some computer problems, but anyway, second to last card here is Vampire Cutthroat. This is a 1 mana 1/1 Skulk Lifelinker. Not a good card. Yeah, people see like really early game creatures with a bunch of ability words tacked onto them, but these aren't really great abilities. Being able to ping 1 early and kind of swing a little bit of life is nice, but compared to something like Indulgent Aristocrat, this is not a wonderful card. And I think I mentioned earlier, Skulk on a 1-power creature is like nice, but it's not impressive. Like, yeah, you're unblockable 1 damage. Okay. 1 point life sling. This card just gets outclassed very, very easily. I could see myself wanting it if I have a card like Stensia Masquerade, or if I'm dedicated to vampires. We'll see a red card in the next video that kind of drains your opponent for the number of vampires you have. But I don't think this really needs to be an uncommon. I don't think it's overall a very strong card, and it really only fits very well in a vampire-based deck, a very heavy vampire deck. I could see myself cutting it. It's just, it doesn't do that much for a 1-drop, but at least it's better than just a vanilla 1/1. Weirded Vampire is a 3/3 for 4 with Madness costing 3. Notice that out of all the red or black cards we just looked at, there weren't very many, if any, actual Madness cards. So there isn't a lot of Madness floating around, but this is a solid card. It's a Hill Giant. If you need to play it on turn 4, then play it on turn 4, and it has, you know, that extra ability that it's a solid 3-mana Madness card. It's definitely a way worse Madness card than Twins of Malware Estate, the 3/5 that you can Madness for 3, but you'll play this alongside it, I believe. It fits on the curve nicely as just a Hill Giant, but vampires don't really want to be, you know, behind on curve. They want to really be curving out and taking advantage of Madness. So, you know, solid common, definitely like filler material, but very nice common if you can get that Madness out. Anyway, sorry for the technical difficulty at the end of this video and my inability to pronounce actual human words. But thank you again for watching. We just checked out the blue and black cards, so that leaves red and green for my last video, and maybe a couple stragglers at the end there. I might have missed 1 or 2 cards in my last actual spoiler video before the full spoiler, so I'll make sure to get those. I know I missed at least 1. But anyway, let me know what you think about these colors. I think blue is actually quite strong. I think white is still leading here. And I think black has a lot of strong options, but also a lot of duds or cards that really need your deck to come together. It is still going to be a synergy-based format, so I could see some of these cards being a little higher than I'm evaluating them. But right now, there are a couple black cards that I'm unimpressed with, and a couple that I think are really strong. Anyway, my name is Timothy. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out the last video I'll have here in just a little bit. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.